Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm going to show you how to reassemble a Penn Surfmaster 250. This reel is what I like to call Franken reels. It's actually an early precursor to the Penn JigMaster, and many people have actually been fooled buying this reel thinking that it was a JigMaster. If you look at it, it shares the frame, the side plates are the same dimensions, and internally at a quick glance you think you're getting an older JigMaster, but you're not. I call it a Franken reel because it's kind of an evolutionary reel between the two. It does have the characteristics of the Penn JigMaster 500. However, the internal parts for the most part are the Long Beach series, the 60 and the 65, particularly in the drag set and bridge assemblies, as well as the dog and the like. So I'm going to show you how to reassemble this. I've taken this reel apart. This reel came into the shop because it was very sluggish, and what I found out was that the reel for the most part was just clogged with a lot of grease and grime. The customer didn't do me any favors. He sprayed the reel down with something. You can see that there's some rust residues and the like in there. But at any rate, I took the time to clean this reel up, and then I thought I would just show you how to put it back together. Since most people seem to get on YouTube when they find that they've started a project, can't finish it, and they're looking for advice on how to finish this. This will also show you how to reassemble the anti-reverse dog that comes with the flat spring as opposed to the coil spring. So if you have one of those, this is a good video for you to watch as well. So I like that. And let's get started by rebuilding the bridge. So this bridge is nickel plated or chrome plated or what have you. It's a nice nice bridge. It doesn't rust. It's the 99 bridge, which the 99 is the Silver Beach series. It comes with a brass pinion on it. The pinion has been removed so that I can clear the shaft. So let's start there. We're going to put a little bit of blue grease. I use a Penn Precision Reel Grease for that. You saw a parts basket that I used before to keep the small pieces and parts. I've laid these out here just so I'm going to be able to show you how this works, but typically I will keep my small pieces and parts in a tray. I also protect my hand, my non-working hand, with a latex glove, which actually comes into use a little bit later in doing dry grease. So we're going to go ahead and put some blue grease onto the shaft for the pinion. We're going to reinstall the pinion, the gear sleeve. I always get that terminology a little bit mixed up. And that gear sleeve is held on with a little through pin that rides in the ridge of that shaft. So you just replace that simply like that. Just put that pin back in and that will hold it from pulling out. And then we can reassemble the drag assembly. So the drag starts with a washer behind that sits on this. Then we have 3 fabric washers, 3 metal washers, and a collar washer. I've laid it out the way that they belong. It's fabric, metal, metal, but the metal here, the middle one, always has an ear or a tab on it. Fabric, last metal, and then the collar gear. So let's go ahead and do that then. We've cleaned these pieces up. So the first piece in is that little washer that rides behind, and we put the main gear on. Then we're going to put the drags on, and I like to use a drag grease to keep the drags flexible. I use a Cal's Universal Drag Grease. It's a little bit thick, and it's designed for drag washers. And so I put a little bit on, and then I use that gloved hand to work that grease into the... And you only need a little bit, and the main purpose of that drag grease is to keep the washers flexible as opposed to providing any other kind of support. I mean, it does make it slip a little bit, but that's kind of makes it easier for the drags to do their work. Okay, then we're going to put some more on that second one. You notice that that first metal washer that I put in there was not the eared washer. The second one becomes the ear washer. That's the one we want to work on there. The second one has tabs on it on both sides, and those tabs fit into the little grooves here. And again, this is pretty much identical to the Model 60 from a drag set. It uses the same washers and metal gearing. So again, we rub that dry grease into that fabric washer to keep it flexible. And then we'll go up top with the last of the metal washers. Now these metal washers have been cleaned. If you need to clean yours during reassembly, use a little bit of steel wool. A Faro steel wool is fine, and that will get most of the contaminants or old drags or what have you over that. Okay, so that's the drag setup for the bridge plate. What we're left with then is the yoke. This is the yoke, the jack, the springs from the assembly, the spool gear, and the anti-reverse mechanism. So let's grab that side plate then. Again, this one's been cleaned. There's a little bit left in that spray down stuff in some of the grooves, so I like to use a little cotton swab just to get at that last residual to pull that up. But this was caked with grease, probably hadn't been serviced in way too long. And folks ask me, what's the ideal in terms of service time? My general take on that is it should be serviced at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, just be consistent. I like to do it at the end of the year so when it sits, it has fresh grease in it and that. And then if you're a heavy user, do it at about midterm through the season as well. All right, I put a little bit of blue grease onto the drive side bearing. I'm going to install the 2 springs that work as a function for spool release. I'm going to shift our attention to the yoke to make sure that the yoke is clean. I'm just going to get a little bit of that off there. And we'll go ahead and put some grease underneath that. Then I'm going to put the spool gear back on. And like everything else here, that spool gear has a little bit of residual junk on it. I'll take that off. I'm checking to make sure that the teeth are okay, that there's not bent, chipped, broken, missing kind of condition. They're fine. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of blue grease on that. And when you install this spool gear, there is an indentation in the one side. It's an narrower side that always faces out to accept the ridge on the spool. We'll go ahead and do that then. That's the way it sits on the yoke. We have the springs there. So we're just going to go ahead and lay the yoke on top of the springs. I'm going to press that down, and then we'll grab the jack, and the jack just slips over the stud on the eccentric, and that's how this goes together. So we have the 2 springs, the yoke, the spool gear, the jack sitting on top. Okay, then we're ready to reinstall the bridge assembly. We do that by pressing down the spool gear so that it sits on top of that bearing. We're going to put this into the assembly, and then we're going to turn it halfway so that the bridge plate is sitting on top of this spool gear. That's going to enable us to install the anti-reverse dog. So there's 2 types of anti-reverse dogs on the older reels. There's one with a flat spring, and there's one with a coil spring, which is the newer edition. This one's an older one. It has the flat spring, so we'll show you how to do that. This one, so then what you do is you press down, you put the bottom side plate screw in, that's the fully threaded one, the anti-reverse dog, and then you'll see that there's a stud that's sitting on the side plate here above the screw, and that's where you take your flat spring and you wrap it around. So you lay the flat spring onto the top of the anti-reverse dog, and then you seat it against the back of the spring. So that's the way it sits like that, and then you complete this by turning it to the point where it realigns with that screw. And what I do on my side plate screw is I don't fully tighten down, I just do it enough to grasp it, because I want to make sure that I get the other ones aligned before I go back and tighten them all down. And what I do with the screws is I reinstall them in an X pattern. Now the one up top is a partially threaded one, that's where those springs are, and it's partially threaded so that the spring can ride up and down without catching on the threads of the screw. And then these you just got to work a little bit because the springs sometimes don't align right, and that's why I only partially tighten this down until I get these things set up. There you go, I just heard a click, so we should be seated. And you just got to play around with them. There's some tolerances in there, some slop. Then I come over to the other side, one on the top, again with that partially threaded one because that's riding on a spring. And we'll just work that in just like the other one. Again, partially tightened until I can make sure that I have that thing set properly. And again, you want to just play around with it a little bit. Having a little trouble aligning, so I'll use a pin. Go straighten that up a little bit. That yoke can slide from time to time as you're going back and doing this. And I guess one of the keys of reel repair is just being patient. You don't want to hammer or force anything. You just want to work it. Eventually you'll get it to grab. There we go, got it to grab. And then there's one more as I reach into my parts bucket that belongs down low. It's the fully threaded screw on the other side. Go ahead and put that back together. And now once I have them, I can tighten all of these down. I do that again in the reverse X pattern, where I go bottom right, top left, top right, bottom left. Okay, and that completes the assembly. So all we want to do now before we go much more crazy, is just turn it, make sure that we've got it operating. We do. We hear the nice click. It's in good shape. And then the one piece I wasn't able to get grease on before is the jack and the eccentric. I can't get those on until we have the bridge plate, otherwise you won't be able to do it properly. So I'm going to go ahead then and install the ferrule. Go ahead and put the star drag nut back on. You want to hold the star drag just to make sure you got it properly seated. Some of the older reels, they take a little bit longer. Want to make sure that they're going on square. Overuse and time, sometimes that first track on the nut is worn a little bit. I think we may have it that time. Let's just see if we can grab it. I got it spinning, so I'm going to just use there we go. Just use a screwdriver to hold it in place there. And we can put the handle on and complete the rest of the turns with that. We'll put now if I was just doing this as a tune-up and didn't take that pinion out and grease, I could put some real oil in there. But I've greased that, so I don't need to do that here. And we'll just put that handle nut back on now. Handle screw, actually, it's a screw. Tighten this down. And you'll notice I'm using an aftermarket Penn Reels wrench. It's available on pennparts.com or Mystic Parts now. And if you do a lot of Penn reel work, it's a nice thing to have. It's a little bit thicker, a little bit longer for leverage. But if you just have the wrench that came with the reel, which is this one, it works perfectly fine. Okay, so we've run that course. We're just going to grab the spool now. This reel apparently was updated. It's got the anodized aluminum spool on it, which is fine. Again, it shares parts with the JigMaster, and it shares parts. Oh, I want to put a little bit of grease in the bearing on the non-drive side. Go ahead and put that back now with the spool. So it shares the frame and the spool and the larger handle of the JigMaster series with the JigMaster, and then it shares the internal gearings and works, drags, and the like with the Long Beach. So I'm just going to go ahead there. We'll tighten this down. Okay, one more little clip to seat that screw. Tighten the screw down. Spin it. And that's how you reassemble a Surfmaster 250. Like I said, kind of the transition reel between the Long Beaches and the JigMasters. And you can tell that they usually have the embossed side plate. In this case, it has the Surfcaster on it. It reads Penn Surfmaster made by Penn Fishing. So it's an older reel. It's from the 40s or 50s, but still dependable today. And with that overhaul and reassembly that we just did there, this one's ready to go fishing again. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe. I've been doing reel repair now for over 20 years, and I'm posting my videos on YouTube to share my experiences and show you how to do it. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.